Welcome to Unit 4, Part 2, Video 2. So again, this is part of the Roman Empire section of Unit 4, considering it Unit 4, Part 2, second video on contributions of the Roman Empire. Let's get started. Alright, so we're going to go through a bunch of the different contributions of the Roman Empire, one at a time. We'll start with language. The language of the Roman Empire was Latin. This is what was spoken all over the empire. The Romans took Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, many different texts and translated them all into Latin. So a lot of historical references were translated into Latin when there were still people around who could speak these languages, who wrote these languages, and this is why it makes it so easy to translate things today of languages that may not be as common because of people who sit down and actually translate them into different languages. So in the Roman Empire, everything was translated into Latin. So if you take Latin, this is an example of Latin up here. Latin is offered at our school, so it is possible that you are in or have taken Latin before. So you might know what some of these mean. Now you'll notice some of the words in this section here that are Latin are familiar if you're in a different language as well. And we'll get to that in just a second, why that is. So Latin became the universal language of learning in Europe. Many English words have Latin roots. For example, deci, meaning 10, aqua, meaning water. Scientific names are still written in Latin. For example, Homo sapiens. So Latin had a huge influence. If you are studying for the SATs, they have you really study Latin roots, because a lot of English words in English, you can figure out what they mean just by understanding the root of the word, which comes from Latin. So at some point you will study a lot of Latin roots, if you haven't already. Many languages spun off from Latin, so this is why you might have seen some words in that section of Latin writing that might have been familiar if you take something like Spanish or French or Portuguese. So the Romance languages spin off from Latin. So there are pieces of Latin in these languages. Examples include Spanish, French, and Portuguese. In terms of literature, Virgil was a very important writer in the Roman Empire. Virgil wrote the Aeneid, which was a Latin epic, and it was a legendary story of Aeneas, a Trojan who traveled to Italy, where he became the ancestor of the Romans. So if you remember when we talked about Romulus and Remus, believed to be the founders of Rome, the two brothers, the twin brothers, it is believed that they came from a line connected with Aeneas. They were descendants of Aeneas, according to legend. In terms of architecture, Romans brought many new ideas to architecture. The arch being one, baked brick, cement. All of these are going to be used for some of the buildings, a lot of the buildings that are going to be created, a lot of the structures that will be created in the Roman Empire, some of which are still standing today. So the arch was really important. It was a way to make taller and heavier structures remain stable. It also allowed the creation of large doors and windows. So now they could build higher because they didn't need as many resources, because the whole area here of the open arch would not need resources anymore. And they wouldn't be as heavy. The structures themselves wouldn't be as heavy because of the lack of resources in these arches. It also allowed for doors and windows, so people to be able to move in and out or see in and out. The way it works is the importance of the arch is this keystone right here. The keystone holds all of these bricks or stone in place. If the keystone weren't there, these would all collapse. So the keystone is the key to how the arch works. Arches are going to be used in all kinds of structures and buildings, many of which have a lot of historical value and are still standing today. So here are some examples of what arches were used in. So you see how it allows for much taller structures to be built. See bridges. All of these use arches. In this example, the arch was incredibly important because they didn't want to dam up the river. So in order to build a bridge here, they needed the arch, which would allow the water to continue through. Aqueducts. We've mentioned aqueducts already. River water was dirty with sewage. A lot of people lived in the cities. There wasn't great disposal methods for human waste. And so the river water, which ran through the cities, was not always very clean. So aqueducts were used to bring clean water to cities from far or nearby hills. Rome had several aqueducts. The city of Rome itself alone had several aqueducts. Could provide 300 gallons of water for each of its 1 million citizens every day. So that's about 60 million of these gallons of water. You've probably seen these before. Worth of water every single day in order to get enough water for all of its citizens. This included drinking water, bathing water, and they had a lot of fountains in Rome, so it also included the fountains. So here we're looking at a map of the city of Rome. You see this here is the Tiber River, and each of these lines, these colored lines, shows the route of a different aqueduct bringing water into the city. So you see the names here in the key that tells you which aqueduct is which based on the color. This is about 350 AD. And you'll notice that most of the places where these aqueducts are headed to bathhouses. Remember, bathhouses are where they're very much like malls almost today, where everyone in Rome would go to bathe, and they would also shop, they would socialize. So these bathhouses, you see many of the aqueducts head straight to the different bathhouses. So this is an example of an aqueduct, another example of an aqueduct. Some of them were built very different than others, but they all had the same purpose, to carry water into the cities. Another very important structure that was created was the Pantheon. This was a temple built for the 7 Roman gods, and it contained the largest dome in the world until the Renaissance in the 1400s. It's over 1,000 years later. So this is a very important structure. There were some architectural feats here with the building of this dome, and we're going to go through exactly how the dome worked. I just want to clarify here. Please do not confuse the Roman Pantheon with the Greek Parthenon, which had the statue of Athena inside of it with the columns all around. Okay, please don't confuse the two. The Roman Pantheon is different from the Greek Parthenon. The way I remember it is, it's kind of silly, but the dome, if you flip it upside down, it kind of looks like it could be a pan. So I think Pantheon. Silly way to remember it, but if it works for you, it works. Or you can find your own way to remember it. So here are some images of how the Pantheon looks, the dome at the top. You'll notice that there is a hole in the top here. This is how they were able to make the dome work. That it was such a large dome. If they had filled that center area, it would have been too heavy in the middle and the whole dome would have collapsed. So the fact that they left the middle open is the reason they could have a dome that was so large. So you see here, it's letting the sunlight in. And there would be a drain there for when it rained in the center of the room at the floor level. The Pantheon was an inspiration of many famous buildings that we have today. You see the domes. Domes become important parts of government buildings. The Roman Forum was the center of government. We've seen this word forum before. It included the Senate, the Emperor's Palace, markets, meeting places, and other government buildings. So the Forum was this area where people would come together to talk about government. There would be the government buildings, and it was in the center of the city. So this is an example of a forum. You see some of the buildings here. We have some temples, and we also have some government buildings, all again in the center of the city. Many countries' capitals are based on the idea and organization of the forum. So if you take a second and look at this map on the screen here, take a look at the title here. This is Washington, D.C. So this is the city of Washington, D.C., and a lot of the government buildings are in the center of the city. You see we have the White House. A lot of the important buildings are located here. There's also another section of important buildings here, both of which can be considered the center of the city. But you notice that there's not a bunch of houses all around here. The houses are going to be on the outskirts, okay, because the government buildings are in the center, the housing is on the outside. That's how Rome did it, and a lot of areas today, capital cities, are structured the same way. The Colosseum is a very important historical site. It's one of the most famous today. It is an ancient sports arena in the shape of an oval stadium. And in the Colosseum, there were many battles that were fought. Over 10,000 slaves, prisoners, or volunteers were killed through fighting, through battles in the Colosseum. It could hold over 50,000 spectators, if over 50,000 people going to watch. There were a lot of mass murders in the Colosseum. This is what it looks like today. It is a very, very popular site to visit if you ever visit Rome. Another image of it today. There were underground tunnels which held contestants and animals. A lot of the times they would have gladiators fighting animals. So it used to have the floor like this, and it's been cut away so that today if you go, you can see all of the underground tunnels that existed. There were many levels to these tunnels underground. They had very intricate pulley systems that would allow for the opening of gates and for ramps to be pulled up so that animals could get up into the arena and soldiers or gladiators. A lot of gladiator fights would occur. A lot of people would come and watch. This was entertainment in Rome, very popular entertainment. We've already mentioned that Roman roads were very solid and lasted for hundreds of years. In terms of medicine, the Romans were some of the first people to take an active interest in the health of common people. They opened medical schools using knowledge gained from all over the empire. Emphasis was placed on public health. So these are some tools that would have been used. Health was very important in the Roman Empire. Scientific discoveries were also important during the Roman Empire. The Roman scientist Ptolemy was a Greek living in the Egyptian city of Alexandria during the time it was controlled by Rome. So as Rome expanded, one of the places that they conquered was Egypt. Alexandria was a city in Egypt established by Alexander the Great. Remember, he conquered an empire that stretched all the way to India after his father conquered Greece, originally from Macedonia. So Ptolemy lives in the city of Alexandria, and Ptolemy made many advances in astronomy, including the creation of the geocentric theory. Now, while it is incorrect, the geocentric theory was the theory for many, many years. This was the theory that the Earth was the center of the universe. So if you see here the idea that the Earth is the center of everything. We know now that the sun is the center of the solar system, but he believed that the Earth was the center of the universe. Again, disproven now, but remained the theory for many years. And we also have Roman law. We've already talked about the 12 tables. The concept of innocent until proven guilty comes from Roman law. So we still use that idea today, that someone is innocent until they are proven guilty. In our own government system, that's the way it works. Ideas from the 12 tables are used by later governments. Again, just like ours, this idea of innocent until proven guilty. This is the end of the video on the contributions of the Roman Empire.